be able to reflect how far you've come, which he calls the gain, where you are today from where you started, relish in that, which also ultimately produces a feeling of gratitude and, to your point, presence, and then use the destination or the future goals as something that's more aspirational and motivational, but not a place of scarcity, not something that's demotivating.
Let's talk about change. The truth is, nothing changes unless you change. And if you want to step into your full potential, you need to surround yourself with the right people. That is exactly why I have created the InPowered Life community. Within this community, I'm going to be teaching you the exact same mindset and energy practices that I have taught my clients that are paying me well over six figures, including CEO owners of billion-dollar organizations and professionals at the very top of their fields. You're going to get access to 2 live virtual calls every single month with me where we're going to dive into mindset, energy practices, spiritual principles that are going to help you thrive in every area of your life. Can't make a call? No worries. We're going to provide you with a recording so that you can catch up anytime. Plus, you're going to have the opportunity for direct coaching from me and to learn from incredible guest speakers who are going to share their best practices and growth. Remember, you become the people that you spend the most time with. So why not spend time within a community that is going to elevate you and your life? For an introductory $499, you're going to get a full year of support and coaching alongside high performers who are committed to expanding their careers, their growth, their finances, and to elevate their overall quality of life. Just click the link in the show notes or log into rudyricksteins.com to lock in your spot and start your transformation today. Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, then hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Aniston Ricksteins, and this is the InPowered Life. Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Ricksteins. I'm your host, and today we are joined by the incredible Nick Friedman. Nick Friedman is an entrepreneur. He's the co-founder of College Hunks Hauling Junk. He's also a best-selling author of Effortless Entrepreneur, which he co-wrote with his business partner. He's a motivational speaker. Listen to this. He is also in movie and TV production. He is an actor and a TV personality. It's like the man is a little bit of absolutely anything and everything. For the benefit of the audience, you know this about me. I love to give you a little more behind the curtain when I'm picking people who are going to come on the show, because I'm always wanting to bring in somebody who is uniquely qualified to serve you as to where you are in your life, in your journey. And I believe that through everybody's journey, we can turn around and help and inspire, uplift, and move and motivate people through what has been our story. My producers came to me and said, gosh, you've got to interview Nick Friedman. And I was like, Nick Friedman? Who's Nick Friedman? And they were like, he's the guy from College Hunks. And then I was like, I'm going to interview a guy with a moving business? And they said, no, you got to look this guy up. And man, did I have so much fun looking you up, Nick. I want to start off by saying, welcome to the show, brother. Thank you so much for being here. And then I want to say thank you for being who you are. It has been so much fun diving into your world and learning a little bit about you, your mind, how you work, what you've done. It is no surprise to me that you're as successful as what you are. I'm excited to have you and your voice on the show, man. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I appreciate the intro. Appreciate you having me. And I guess that's the beauty of the internet now. And with a consumer brand, we've been not shy about putting as much information about our journey as possible out there. So glad you were able to get some research done before we met together.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So for the benefit of the audience, I want to ask, obviously you started this incredible business. We now know it today as, College Hunks. We see the vans everywhere we drive. I don't think there's a person in the continental US that hasn't seen one of your 250,000 franchises. I'm sorry, your 250 franchises, your 300 million in revenue that you produce, obviously profoundly successful. Few people, I would imagine, know the story of how you started. And I don't want to necessarily go through the whole story, because anybody who wants to know the details of how you started, they can go ahead and Google it. I want to get into a little more of the specificity behind it, because I think that's where the gold really lies. And so I want to recap for the benefit of the audience very quickly. You were in college. Your best friend's mom said, "Hey, I've got a van. Why don't you use the van? You guys can haul some junk." She throws out a joke name, like you can name it College Hunks. You guys laugh. You start moving it. You make $8,000 in the summer. You then leave college, get day jobs, and then you quit your day job and you actually start the business. And I'm so curious because we have hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of listeners to an episode, and the majority of them are people who are either aspiring to build a business, to start something, to move forward in life, but there seems to be this thing that holds them back. And I would love to know, what was it for you and Omar, that moment, that catalyst that said, "Hey, we're going to leave this college degree behind for a moment and the job that comes with it, and we're going to start something that doesn't necessarily make sense to everybody else, but we know it makes sense to us." What did that take?
Well, I'll say, and you did a great job of recapping the startup story. So I like you said, those are the high level talking points. I wasn't brought up to follow the pursuing a career in entrepreneurship, and I don't think most kids grow up saying, "Hey, I want to own a moving business or a junk removal business." I was brought up to follow the more traditional career path. You work hard at school, you get a degree, you get a job, you move up this corporate ladder, maybe you retire in your 60s or 70s and sail off into the sunset. And it was that summer before our senior year of college that Omar's mom kind of gave us the opportunity to use her van, where the first light bulb moment was for me to say, wow, there's actually something you can do that's kind of for others, but it's also in your own interest as well. And you can see the immediate impact that it has. And so when we did get regular jobs right after college, it was very unfulfilling as I thought about the next 10, 20, 30 years of my life. And so I emailed Omar and said, "Hey, this isn't going to be for me. We did this business last summer. What if we pursued that full time? What's your timeline for doing that full time?" And he emailed me back, all capital letters, "My timeline's right now, exclamation point, let's do this." And so I remember talking to my dad, and my dad was more conservative in terms of taking risks. He was an eye doctor. So, again, maybe more traditional path. And he said, "Well, why don't you crawl before you walk and run? Don't quit your day job. You could do the junk hauling and moving on the nights and weekends for a little while." And, Omar quit his job right away. So we sort of tag teamed, where Omar would work Monday through Friday on the truck. I'd work in the evenings helping to follow up missed jobs. And then I would do the weekends on the truck myself. And it was about 2 months into it. And my dad came home, and I remember he looked at me, it was late at night, and he was like, "What are you up to?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I was up early emptying out the truck before I went to my day job. But then really during my day job, I was ducking into the janitor closet to answer calls for College Hunks. And I was, writing things down in the spreadsheet for follow up. And now it's late at night and I'm putting stuff into the bookkeeping software, and I'm following up with leads and, scheduling out for tomorrow. And I'm not tired, and I've been at it for 15 hours. So I had this energy and this enthusiasm about me. And he said, "Well, I see this energy you've got. I think it's probably now makes sense for you to go full bore, full time into this." And so I think that gave me sort of the permission that I could give myself or grant myself to take the risk. And I think the other thing that I always did at the beginning was sort of this, worst case scenario mindset. Like, hey, if most kids would quit this after college and go do a real job, and I tried to do that, but if this moving and junk removal thing doesn't work out, I can go back and get a job. I can go back and get a MBA or graduate degree and sort of pursue the traditional path. And I'm still young and I'm still, relatively low responsibility. And so the aspirational aspect of building something, building a brand, building a national company, mixed with the ability to, I think, minimize the worst case scenario in my mind, allowed me to pursue it full time. And I'll say the other thing, the story that I always tell, but it's worth repeating because I think any startup entrepreneur can relate. When we first started, we were doing all of the work ourselves. And so we bought a 1-800 number to make ourselves look big, but it was still on the back of the truck. It was still routed to our cell phone. And so I'd be driving, and sometimes people would call to complain about erratic driving, and they'd call the 800 number on the back of the truck. And I'd be in the driver's seat answering that call, being like, "Oh yeah, we'll fire those guys. When they get back to the office, we'll tell them to be safer on the road. Thanks for reporting that to us." So probably fired ourselves 3 or 4 times that first summer. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but, we started to burn out after a few months of doing all the work ourselves. And, it was very fun and exciting in that sort of honeymoon phase, but then reality sinks in that this is hard work. And this is in our case, physical work on top of the elements of trying to build a brand and build a business. So, that was sort of the next phase is how do we learn how to get off the truck and build an actual company?
I have, gosh, just from that alone, so many questions. I always like to listen to what somebody's saying and then think, what would the audience be thinking now? And where would they want to know more information? And for some more context for you, Nick, I work mostly with people. I mean, I currently right now coach, support, and scale 2 franchise organizations. I work with a number of companies, whether they startups to billion-dollar organizations, helping them motivate their teams, move them forward. And so I'm constantly being confronted by people in this space where they say, man, I've got a day job. I want to start my own business. Here's my idea. What do I do? When do I do it? Do I quit my job? Like how much do I need in my savings? Like, and you, man, it's like I'm trying not to take words out of your mouth here. And so I would love to know if you were to start today, because you're in your 40s now, and let's assume you did not jump, you had the corporate job, but you have the idea. What would you do differently today because you quit your job when you realized I've got what it takes and I'm going to make this work? You also said that you did it at a time where you didn't have a lot, meaning you weren't married, you didn't have 4 kids, you didn't have all of this responsibility, your terminology, but you also knew who you were and what you were capable of. And you were pushing the envelope, the 15-hour days. And if you had to redo it today, would you change that or would you still keep one foot in the safety and security while you were building it?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of things that you just recapped from my story was a little bit of luxury of fortune that I had being at a young age, having a business partner that could actually quit his job and sort of be the first tip of the spear into the fire, and then I was sort of helping support him in the nights and weekends. And then enough after a month went by, 2 months went by, it was clear the business was likely going to work that I jumped in there, no parachute along with him. And so, using the hypothetical example of as you're older and you've got more responsibility, you've got a mortgage, you've got car payments, you've got, wife and kids to support it, it is more daunting and there is more at stake that you're, potentially risking to pursue a business idea. And so I think, the advice I give people when, they come to me and sort of ask those types of questions is, again, do the worst case scenario mapping. What does it look like if this doesn't work? Not that you're setting yourself up for failure, but you need to understand sort of a go no go type of outcome. And then is there some at least market testing that we can do that I could do to validate that there's a viable opportunity if I do pursue this full time. So, sticking my toe in the water, doing some market testing, doing a soft launch, because the market in our business told us very quickly that this could work, even though, again, we were fortunate. It was one truck, low overhead. We were the labor. So we were, didn't have employees to support. And so we were able to kind of do it in a very low risk, low overhead way, but it was very clear that there was a need for the service. In our case, people thought the name and the colors were catchy. And so I realized that there was something viable here that we could build upon. And so somebody contemplating a pursuit of a business, I think it would be important to, you don't want to get paralyzed by analysis, but you want to do some diligence up front to say, is the market open to this type of service, product, whatever the business idea is? Is this something that I could be effective at? And would I enjoy doing it? And I think those questions to contemplate. And then once you do jump, you kind of have to be all in and willing to put in those, 15 plus hour days. And that's something else that comes at an expense of your mental sanity or your family or your kids, if those are situations that exist at that time. So a lot of variables to dissect, but I think, those would be the things that I would be contemplating if I were thinking about taking a leap at the age I'm at now.
What's so interesting is when you look at the statistics, they say 90% of businesses don't make 8 years. And I think that's also when we look at companies or businesses that have registered for a name or started a business, but they never actually got it off the ground. And so we have to dilute that. But let's say it's 50% of businesses that do open, that are operating, they eventually close down within 8 years. it is scary to think about putting everything on the line, starting a business, following your passion, leaving what is deemed the safe route. But then we have these incredible stories of success where you and your friend created a business. And I'm going to use my brother's terminology here for a second. It's not the sexiest looking business, right? I mean, it's you're hauling junk, you're creating a moving van, and yet you've turned it into an incredible, not only viable business for yourselves, but now for over 250 franchisees. Um, Knowing obviously that I support so many different businesses in scaling and bringing franchisees into businesses and helping them grow and scale the further vision. I'd be super curious to ask you, because you had mentioned a moment ago that the two of you hit burnout point because you were working in the business, not on the business. Obviously, there it's easy to be able to hire somebody to come in and help you move because that's, low cost labor, but you're still working in the business. What did it take for you to start working on the business? And then what was the next cut for you to start now looking at franchising your business?
Yeah. So I'll say when we started to burn out a little bit, one of our mentors recommended to us a book called The E-Myth Revisited by a guy named Michael Gerber. Very simple kind of entrepreneurship handbook that touches on the things you mentioned, working on the business, not in it, creating systems and processes so that the business can scale. So when we read that, it was like another light bulb moment for us is, hey, if we're ever going to have another truck, let alone another location, we've got to start documenting how we do everything. So we literally just started creating simple checklists about what we did every day that was effective and impactful, and made that somewhat ingrained in our sort of approach to evolving the company. In that book, he talks about franchising, and he uses it as an example of systemizing your business in a way that it could be replicated or handed off to somebody else to operate in the same way or better than you do. Now, when we read that, we didn't really know what franchising was, with the exception of some of the fast food chains that we had eaten at. And it seemed a little bit glamorized. Looking back, I would say we got into franchising with a little bit of a naive, somewhat ignorant view of what it was going to take to build a successful franchise organization. At the time, it almost seemed like a bit of an escape route, like, oh, passive income. Oh, others will invest in the company and then they'll go do the hard work or the heavy lifting, no pun intended with our business, right? Or pun intended with our business. And so when we started down that path of franchising, we didn't know that it's not until you have 50 or 100 franchisees that the royalty stream is really sufficient to cover your overhead. You're sort of building this plane in flight. We also didn't know that getting to 10, 20, 30 franchisees was probably more difficult than anything else I've ever done in business, because you don't have a proven model yet. We didn't have a proven model yet. People didn't know who our brand was. We were having to sort of convince people why they should invest in this concept with a funny name and a manual labor component to it. And so, in a lot of times people will come to me and ask, hey, should I franchise my company? And I try to explain to them sort of the good, bad, and ugly of it that maybe we didn't know, that we kind of had blinders on. And maybe it worked to our advantage because we didn't know how challenging it was going to be. And so we decided to go ahead and pursue it anyway. And once we got down that tunnel, we decided not to turn back, and we kept marching and marching and digging and digging. And we finally, I would say, crossed the canyon to the other side, where the business is very lucrative. And we've created, like you said, very successful franchise owners in our system. But yeah, in the early days, for us, it was, like you said, a simple concept, trucks and labor. We tried to put a creative spin on it. We tried to make it moving sexy with the name Hunks, right? There's a physical attribute. We turned it into an acronym, which stands for honest, uniformed, nice, knowledgeable service. That became our brand promise. And a lot of that we did to try to stand out in a crowded landscape. We had read another book called The Purple Cow by a guy named Seth Godin. Very simple concept also. It's like if you're driving down a country road and you see a field of brown cows, you keep driving, you've seen it before. There's nothing remarkable about it. But if there's a purple cow in that field, especially nowadays, you'll put it on social media, you'll tell your friends and neighbors about it. And so the point of that book is, to figure out how to stand out in a crowded landscape, not just with the image, which our name and our colors help us stand out, but ultimately the employee experience, the client experience, and then in our case, the franchise owner experience as well. And so that resonated for us to become very intentional about how to create those, points of differentiation. And so I think those two things, understanding or not having a full comprehension of franchising, but deciding that was going to be our way to, meet our aspiration of becoming a national brand, and then figuring out ways to stand out in a crowded landscape. I think we're critical to our long march of a journey.
Hey, it's Aniston Ricksteins here, and I want to ask you, have you ever wondered if there's more to your life and work than what you're doing right now? What if I told you that the universe is hiring and you were born to fill a role that will bring you true purpose and success? In my new #1 best-selling book, The Universe is Hiring, Discover the Role You Were Born to Fill, I'm going to show you exactly how to step into that role. This isn't just a book full of inspiration. It's a roadmap to help you start shifting into a more fulfilling life right now. You'll get clear on your unique purpose, learn how to align with your strengths, and take actionable steps towards the career and life that truly light you up. If you're ready to make a change and start living the life you were meant for, grab your copy today. Available anywhere you buy your books online, or click the link in the show notes.
I have a bunch of questions that are not related necessarily directly to your business, because I think that's what people are really going to want to know. But I have to dive in just a little further into the franchise side of it, because so many people think I've got a business, I've proven my model, it's going to work, and then they want to bring franchises in. I've actually heard you in an interview before saying that you really spend 10, 15 minutes in a conversation with somebody that is 20 minutes in length, convincing them not to, because people don't realize what it actually takes to build a franchise model. I've always likened franchisees as a marriage. You're getting into bed with somebody, and it's not an employee that you can just reprimand or give them a notice or terminate. Like, you're really stuck with someone, and it's an arduous process to remove a negative apple, I would say, from the environment. Yet you've built such a successful company, and I would love to know from your vantage point, because I have a follow-up question to this, which I think is going to answer the question beautifully. But I would love to know, like, what was the strategy that the two of you brought into your business when bringing people? Because I don't think enough people pay attention to, when they meet someone, being discerning about, is this right? Because they're just looking for the solution. They're looking for the cash injection. They're looking for the money, or they're looking for the relationship, or they're looking for the friend, but they ignore information that's right there. What have you used? What is you leveraged to help you make the right decisions?
Yeah, well, I'll say the advice that we received and that we give, which is very easy to sit up, as an established franchisor to tell somebody who's just getting started, is, be discerning. Don't just sell it to anybody that can write a check or fog a mirror. Don't sell too much territory. Don't, negotiate the agreement. Those are all very valid and important piece of advice. But as an early stage franchisor, they're almost impossible to adhere to, because we needed the cash. We had just, spent money on consultants and attorneys and software and marketing. We needed to sell franchises, so we needed the cash injection. Those early franchisees had a little bit of leverage because they were taking a bit of a leap of faith on a new sort of unproven model. So they were right to ask for more territory, or they were right to ask for, incentives or discounts on their royalty stream or franchise fees. And, who were we as, at the time, guys in our early mid 20s to say, like, to some guy who's 35 or 40 at the time, who's getting ready to write a, $100,000 check, no, take it or leave it. And so those are very difficult for us. We had heard the advice and we tried to stick to it as best we could. But, at the end of the day, we, in some cases, had to just keep the lights on. And so had to sort of balance this, this teeter-tottering of, needing to sell franchises, but also knowing that we needed to sell the right franchises to the right people that were going to be a good fit for us culturally, that were going to actually have potential to be successful in the business model. And so, I would give the same advice to startup franchisors, because it is viable, valid advice. If you have the ability and discipline to be able to be very discerning as to who fits your culture, aligns with your values, is going to be as all in on the business in whatever market as you were with your corporate locations, then that would be the best path as a franchisor. to adhere to. Again, the reality and the aspiration don't always align, and they didn't align in our case. Like we had to sort of stretch a little bit in some of those examples. I think the other piece that I would have done differently as a franchisor is I would have had at least 2 or 3 locations as proof of concept that it can work in, separate and apart from our main flagship first operation. Because when we started franchising, it was only like 2 or 3 years after we had opened up for business, and we had grown a successful business, but it was also sort of the peak of the housing market run up just before the housing market crash. And, we started selling franchises, and a lot of our early stage franchisees faced the headwinds that we didn't face when we had first gotten started. And so those would be probably 2 things I would have done slightly differently as well, being able to try to adhere to be a little bit more discerning, and then had at least 2 or 3 locations that we could have, propped up as our test cases and proof of concept before, trial and error with our early stage franchisees.
I heard a story that in the very beginning of COVID, when you obviously had a lot less people utilizing the services, there were so many shifts and changes. People didn't really know what was happening. You had identified, and I'm not sure if it was you or if it was Omar, but as an organization, you had identified that there was a possibility for you to do a bit of a give back model where you actually supported people with domestic violence to be able to move out, because people were stuck at home in the middle of COVID with their abusers. And, when I read the story, I actually thought what was fascinating about this was more that, logic tells me now, yes, that's great, but you have to enroll at that time 200 plus business owners who are under your umbrella. Hey, you need to go and do this for free, and you've got to pay your staff, and you've got to go and haul somebody else's stuff. I would love to know, like, what did it take to get people to be enrolled in on that vision? Obviously, in hindsight, it was very beneficial for you, but when people are worried about money, when they're worried about making their payments, how did you get your teams to be able to buy into that process?
Well, we've very early on positioned and committed ourselves to being what we call purpose-driven, values-based, socially conscious organization. And I know that those can sound cliche or somewhat, buzzwordy, but we believe in it wholeheartedly, that our purpose is to move the world, not just moving people's stuff, but making a positive impact in the lives of the people we serve, the communities we serve. We have a set of core values, as Jim Collins defines in his book, Good to Great, that allows us to select the behaviors of who we want to have in our organization and how they conduct themselves. And then we do want to be socially conscious, to know that some of the things that we can do have a greater impact beyond just the service we provide. So as you mentioned, the domestic violence moving opportunity arose through COVID. We had some additional resource availability, trucks and labor. It was identified through the, there's a lot of headlines about, like you said, people being kind of stuck with their, abusers, and we didn't want moving to be the limiting or the economics of moving to be the limiting factor of somebody wanting to leave that situation. So there's actually a few things that we had to navigate through that, because number one, a lot of those situations and environments are not the safest environments to send our guys into. And we're not first responders. We're not law enforcement. We're not caseworkers. We have no, formal training on how to walk into an abusive environment and help move somebody's furniture out. And it's not like the abuser is in a, hey, thanks for being here to move this lady out, or, that I've been beating up. Like, they're not happy to see us if they're even there. So we had to work hand in hand with law enforcement. We also had to work with domestic violence shelters that would help quarterback and coordinate and meet with our teams on site. So we weren't sending our guys into a dangerous situation that they would be, at risk from as well. So not only do we have to convince our franchise owners that this was the right thing to do, and be willing to, make some financial concessions for this process, but also prepare them for something that was not, right down the strike zone of our core service offering. This wasn't, your average move or junk haul. This is going into a relatively potentially dangerous situation, and just focusing on what we do, which is moving the items, and then allow the professionals to handle the more nuanced elements of those dynamics. And so, like anything in franchising, I think like anything in business, it takes communication, it takes influence, it takes helping people understand the why behind it. we did, as the franchisor, invest in helping to offset some of the discounts that the franchisees were doing. We have a national ad fund that we collect, so we were utilizing that to put towards sort of supplementing the investment that the franchisees were making, because they were obviously many of them were in financial constraints as well. And we believe also there's got to be a balance when you're in business. We say no margin, no mission. So you've got to be a profitable business if you're able, in order to be able to pursue the donations and the social causes. Because I've seen a lot of business owners, even in our company, almost donate themselves out of business because people are asking for free moves for this charity or that charity or this community event, and before you know it, you've burned through a lot of cash reserves because you're utilizing your trucks and your labor to do stuff for free. And you want to be able to help everybody, but the reality is, if you don't have a business, you can't help anyone. And so that's sort of the balance that we have to strike as well. But that was an opportunity that I think was too powerful to pass up as a brand. It was an opportunity that I think aligned with our values. Our franchisees rallied behind it. The team members in our franchise system were big believers in it. We were actually blown away by the amount of response and requests that we got. And some of these stories were, pretty devastating to hear about some of the circumstances that people were stuck in. To understand, it opened our eyes to how prevalent domestic violence really is, and how stuck some folks feel when they're in those environments. Is so that part was a little depressing as well, on top of all the stuff that we were dealing with on COVID. But yeah, that was an opportunity we were glad we were able to at least play a role in.
Well, I actually saw a Instagram post, and I don't really remember the specifics around it, but in COVID, about College Hunks doing this, that people were stuck. And that was when I heard, obviously, there's, people that are at home now having to spend all day, every day with their abusers. It was a thought I'd never thought of until I saw this post. And obviously then your business stood out for me as one of the people leading the charge in this. For the benefit of the audience that does not necessarily know you, your business partner, your business itself, I also want to just advocate on your behalf for a moment that you've given away over 4 million meals as part of your give back process, and that for every single move that you do, you donate 2 plates of food, which I think is just absolutely incredible. Because so many people, they say that they're purpose driven, they say they want to give back, but they don't necessarily put their money where their mouth is, and take the steps and take the action. And so I love that, not just in that one instance of supporting US Hunger, you also, in addition to that, have done other things like being able to support domestic violence. And it takes a lot of courage, especially in a time like COVID, when there's so much uncertainty, where we're not making the money, to then dip into where would be potentially profitability, taking out of your advertising fund so that you could then support, or your marketing fund, so you can go back, reinvest, and support your people so they can go out and support the people. Absolutely genius move in hindsight, but at the time, that wasn't the logic of where you were at. It was about creating impact and serving and supporting, which I think is just incredible. I want to pivot so slightly, but still within the line of the work that you do today. This is the InPowered Life Podcast. I believe that everything that ever happens to anybody is always a perfectly, carefully, divinely orchestrated number of synchronistic events that prepare you for the person you get to become. And your life, and in learning about you, you've had so many moments where there were these, like, you can call them these, God moments, you can call them synchronicities. I mean, there's just so many that I can even just think of in my short time of researching you. I'm going to go back and use the one example that we'd used in the very beginning of the show. And that was Omar's mom saying, "Oh my gosh, you should go and move, junk, and you should call it College Hunks." And then it's like a ha ha, but now look at what it's turned into. There's being on Shark Tank. There's all these moments that really supported you, your brand, your business, opportunities that got to move you forward. And I bring this up because I want people to hear this and then turn around and look back at their life. Where are the breadcrumbs? Where are these moments, these two divinely orchestrated moments that are preparing them to take that next step, that next leap of faith? And so I'd love to know from you, what was, in your opinion, the biggest moment that you've had in your life that was like the synchronistic? You could never have planned it. You never in a million years could have anticipated that this was how the next level was going to unfold for you. What would be a good story to share?
Wow. I don't know if this is the defining moment, but it's certainly one that pops into my head. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I went to college in California. We moved back to D.C. We started the business there. When we started to franchise it, one of the things we really believed was going to be important was to have a call center which fielded the phone calls for the franchisees. And the DC area, high cost of living, high cost of labor, not really a call center environment to hire from. And this was before people were, having remote call centers. So we just did some research, random research on Google. I searched, call center cities in the US. And it was like 5 that popped up: Oklahoma City, Minneapolis, I think somewhere in Texas, and Tampa, Florida was one that popped up. And it just sort of, Tampa, Florida, I'd never been there. I had heard of the Buccaneers, and I pictured sunshine and palm trees, and similar to where I'd gone to college on the other coast, which was a little too far away from home. And Omar had gone to college in Miami, but that was a little bit too hectic and busy. So we did some more research and found that Pods, the portable storage company, had their headquarters down in Tampa, and they had just had this big private equity exit that sounded absolutely incredible. And so then I looked online on like Craigslist at real estate in Tampa, and it was like a fraction of what I was paying in DC to live. And so we decided, hey, let's just move to Tampa. Let's move to Tampa and open up a call center and see where this goes. My parents expected I was going to move back after a year or two. I think I told them I was going to move back after a year or two of setting up the call center in Tampa. But I've been down here since 2008, so almost 20 years, really almost my entire adult life. And I think that was, sort of a butterfly. There's, like you said, a lot of butterfly effect moments in our business, but that was one that I think formed us and prepared us for the path that elevated our business. We had just started franchising. We found our first director of franchise operations based down here. We set up a really robust call center, which until COVID grew to 200, almost 300 agents under one roof, and then went full remote after COVID. Very supportive business community. It was a great cost of living, quality of life. And, I guess to put the cherry on top, I met my now wife 6 months after moving down here. And Omar met his now wife a week after I met my now wife, or it might have been a week before. And so, really just literally it's formed everything, both personally, professionally, foundationally, for me. It's a great home base. I love, coming home to Tampa after being away for work or for, other travel. And so, I think your geography or your location, whether it's your neighborhood, your community, your street, you're on, who you surround yourself with, all of those things help form you. Our company president today joined our company as a controller 10 years ago, but he was a senior at University of Tampa doing a case study competition about our company when we had been there for like a year in Tampa. Because we couldn't afford consultants, we went and did a case study at the University of Tampa, and he was so impressed by sort of what we were trying to build, and he made such an impression on us that he was able to follow up with us a few years later. So that one sort of decision led to so many other little butterfly effects that led to where we are. I give that a lot of credit. That's the one that popped into my head based on that question. But I could probably look back at so many other breadcrumbs, like you said, whether it was the business plan that Omar won in college. Had he not won that business plan competition, I don't know that we would have had the confidence to pursue the business full time. If he had gotten second or third place, maybe we would have thought like, hey, that was cool. That was a good idea to do while we were, in college, but, we've got to go do the real world now. And I believe the story on that one goes, one of the judges had changed his score at the very last minute from a 7 to a 9, and Omar won by 1 point. So again, another small butterfly effect in the overall journey. And all of our lives are probably defined, like you said, by all those different culminations of divine happenings. And those are a few that jump out to me.
As a high performance coach, I love to remind people that presence is power. And that when you're present in your day, you're present in your mind, you're present in your body, that you are the most powerful version of yourself. And it's only that when you're present in your everyday can you see the synchronistic events that are happening, these little moments that, you're being prepared or moved forward. It's like the nudges that say, hey, Nick, dude, you're on the right path. Just keep going, just keep going. And we're so often caught up in the day-to-day of our life that we actually stop living the life. And when people can turn around in hindsight and say, oh my gosh, looking back now, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, now we can see the divinity in it. The point of my podcast is to get people to see the divinity in this moment right now.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of another book I just read called The Gap versus the Gain by Dan Sullivan. And he basically talks about a lot of us, especially entrepreneurial minded folks, are always looking ahead, but feeling anxiety about, the gap, what's missing. But the problem is no matter how far you go, that quote unquote destination keeps moving. And so you're always going to be living in the gap if that's your mindset. And so he encourages, the takeaway in that book is, be able to reflect how far you've come, which he calls the gain, where you are today from where you started, relish in that, which also ultimately produces a feeling of gratitude and, to your point, presence. And then use the destination or the future goals as something that's more aspirational and motivational, but not a place of scarcity, not something that's demotivating. And I think that sort of echoes the thing that you just shared, because mindset is so powerful. And when you're pursuing something in business or life or otherwise, it's so easy to get discouraged because, I'm not, you're comparing yourself, especially in the social media era, to what other people are doing or what other people have. You've set out these lofty visions. You get excited about it at first, but it doesn't happen fast enough for your own, patience, or didn't happen, as I look back on our journey, as fast as we had hoped it would. And so I think those being able to appreciate the journey that you've come, from where you've started to where you are, puts you in a frame of mind that allows you to continue to be excited about what is to come, but not discouraged that all of the things that you aspire to do or achieve haven't happened yet.
So I want to pivot again one more time as we bring this episode to a close. You have what I would argue so many people want, right? You have a $300 million a year company. You're very successful, multiple streams of income. You've got an incredible wife. You've got 4 beautiful, healthy kids. And yet you still go to work. You still show up. In addition to that, you authored a book, incredible book, I want to add, which highlighted your journey of how you started, how you got to where you're going, and the learnings of all of what it took to be able to get there. You then became a TV producer and then a movie producer, and then, good God, you're in a Jeff Bezos biopic. And like, there's just so many different aspects to you. And when I said in the very beginning, when I got excited about interviewing you, it was because there's such a breadth to who you are and to how you show up. You're not boxed or limited by any one thing. The biggest thing that I come up with in most people's lives in business, whether it's in corporate or whether they are in their own company, is that they identify with who they are in their business. And that the moment they leave that title or that company or they exit, they're lost, they're confused, they don't know who they are, they're so unhappy, they've got millions in the bank, they've got the family, but they are so disconnected from who they are. You seem to be so grounded in who you are, wanting to be able to create impact, wanting to be able to serve. You seem to have figured out how do you create the balance. So my question really isn't only aimed in one direction. It's more wherever you want to take it. But what gives you the drive or the motivation to still show up to work, even though you've quote unquote made it? And then also, what has really supported you in being grounded in who you are and not caught up in necessarily the title or the money or the business itself?
Yeah. It's been an ongoing evolution, and honestly, an ongoing struggle and battle from the early years. I think in the early days, I was probably more motivated by ego and title and achievement. And as I matured a little bit and also surrounded myself with people that had achieved what I envisioned or what I perceived as achieved higher levels of success or greater levels of accomplishment, I would try to observe or recognize patterns or take, bits and pieces of wisdom and advice. And what I found as a consistency is, one, to your point, an entrepreneur or a high achiever, it's very difficult to quote unquote retire. What I thought when I was younger is like, oh, I'll just make X and then I can go sit on the beach and do nothing. I saw an interview with Nick Saban, the football coach, and they were asking him, how does he stay motivated? He's won national championships. Of course, he retired. Now he's going to do the broadcasting, but this was when he was still coaching. And he said, complacency leads to bad decisions. Bad decisions lead to bad outcomes. And so I do think that when I heard that, when I've looked at other successful entrepreneurs that have continued to improve and evolve and make impact, my paradigm shift a little bit, where it's like, hey, I'm not trying to just get to an X level and then ride off into the sunset. Like, this is what these are gifts I was bestowed upon, I was born with and helped develop by others, peers and mentors. I need to use these tools and these gifts. And so the thing that I become a little bit more passionate about is what I would call sort of potential maximization. How do I continue to improve myself as a leader, as a husband, as a father, as a business entrepreneur, with some of my other, kind of creative pursuits? How do I get better at those hobbies? And, as a brand, as a company, how do we maximize this platform that we've created, right? It's started as a beat up cargo van. It's evolved to 200 plus franchisees, 300 million annual sales. But what is to stop it from becoming $1 billion brand? And what type of impact would that have in the communities and the employees and the franchise owners that are a part of that journey? So that's the stuff that I think has become more exciting to me, is sort of the potential maximization and continued progress and evolution and just getting better. My wife joked, I asked her once playfully, I said, hey, what do you think I'm good at? And she said, well, you're really good at trying to get better. And I was like, well, what does that mean? She was like, well, you read these self-help books, you think you'd be, helped by now. And I said, well, it's a never ending process of improvement. It's not like you're fixed and, you ride off into the sunset. So I think that mindset for me, forever learning, has allowed me to continue to evolve to sort of how you describe me, or at least your perception of me today. I don't think it was always like that. And I think, hopefully I can continue to evolve and get better and have more clarity of mind as I get older and more mature as well.
That beautifully sets up my last question for you. And I've loved our interview, and thank you again graciously for your time today. I don't believe that our lives are about us. And I don't believe that we come here so that we can start a business, make a lot of money, and then die. I think that life is about a journey, and that in learning, in making mistakes, in moving forward, that we gain a vantage point. We have a lesson. And then in gaining that lesson, we get to turn around and teach it. And turning around, teaching it and sharing it, we get to lessen somebody else's time and the pain. It speaks into the benefit of your book. It speaks into the motivation work that you do and how you support and motivate your franchisees and your teams and yourself, and then no doubt your kids. And so I love to look at people's lives, especially people that have produced profound results in multiple areas of life, to then turn around and look at, what was the meaning of this life? Like, what did you come here to do? What did you come here to teach? And I would love to ask you, as we bring it to a close, if you were going to teach on one topic, one lesson, one value of something that you've learned, that you believe as a soul you chose to bring into this lifetime, the business, the marriage, the kids, everything was just the pre-qualification. What would be that one message you would want to leave the world with if you were to leave it today?
When we boil down to like our company purpose, and which ultimately stems from my purpose as a founder, because I believe our business is a reflection of our own values and motivations as founders. We say it's to make a positive impact. It's really simple. It's really basic, but how do we make a positive impact in the lives of the team members we employ, the franchise owners we align with, the clients that we serve, the communities that we operate in my case as well, as a father, as a community participant in Tampa and beyond. How do we make a positive impact? And I think a lot of times they'll say, hey, follow your passion. But I've seen that if I had heard that advice when I was in my college years, I probably would have pursued something in basketball because I was, if you ask me what am I passionate about, I liked basketball. I was passionate about basketball. But I think passion can sort of ebb and flow. What I'm really purposeful about is making a positive impact. I don't think that changes. I think passion can kind of ebb and flow. I think purpose is a little bit more foundational. And so to me, that would be the piece for me is making a positive impact, educating others on how to do that as well in whatever capacity they have. And I think there's a level of fulfillment and also significance with doing that.
I would go as far as to say that basketball was your hobby that you passionately loved, but that your purpose is in who you are. Anybody who is listening to this or watching it on YouTube and can see your facial expressions and how you are thinking and how intentional you are, you quoted 4 incredible self-development books and then also recapped your learnings from each one of them. You then underscored it about your wife speaking about how you're always wanting to improve, get better, so that you can leave a room better than you found it. I think that your purpose or your passion was to create that level of impact. I think that for so many leaders, they're trying to be the right stoic leader, and the best leaders are the leaders that lead by example. They are the example of how you should live and lead and treat people. I think the reason that you and Omar are so successful is because you are foundationally wanting to create an impact and serve and support people. You mentioned it 4 times throughout the episode today. And so your success to me is absolutely no surprise. You're in your 40s. You've got at least another 60 plus years, I imagine, to continue to go out and grow and create impact. For anybody who wants to, look into buying a franchise or working with you guys, we're going to go ahead and drop your links to your website into the show notes for them. I'm going to put the link in for your book as well, which I highly recommend people get their hands on. You've got some documentaries that are out, as well as some not Netflix, Prime and Apple TV links. We'll drop those in the show notes for anybody who's interested. But I just want to take a moment to just acknowledge you, who you are and how you show up. Success to me is never measured by money, because the people that have the most of it are usually the least successful people I know. And you seem to have created success not only in who you are, how you show up, but how you leave people. And then in addition to that, the impact that people then make as an extension of who you are. It's evident in you, it's evident in your business, it's evident in your franchisees, and then in just all the people that talk about you, because that's also another accolade. I just want to say thank you so much for graciously spending time with us and impacting our audience. I appreciate you. I love you, brother. And I want to just say to the audience, I want you to take something you've learned from this episode today. Maybe it's read one of the 4 books. Maybe it's to start your business, to build up your plan, to believe in yourself, to start with 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Maybe it's you're ready to quit your job. But take something from today's episode and put it into action. And then the greatest gift that you can give somebody who has selflessly poured into you would be to send them a note to say thank you. And so I would encourage that if something that Nick has said today has impacted you, share it with him. Send him a DM on Instagram. Find his email address, phone College Hunks, and just leave a review. But do something amazing for him today, because he's beautifully given his time in servitude of you today. So Nick, I appreciate you, brother, and thank you for joining us on the Empowered Life Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.